Hello eBayers and welcome to this eBay auction demonstration video for this Harrison 11-inch metal turning lathe. Now I'm going to demonstrate the machine working very shortly. Let's just go through a few headline facts. I can't see a serial number, but this lathe dates from the 1950s or the 1960s. It being an 11-inch model is an imperial lathe. Therefore the screw cutting with this Norton screw cutting gearbox, and therefore the pitch of the lead screws is all imperial. It cuts TPI, teeth per inch threads, and the 11 inch is actually indicative of the centre height, that being 5.5 inches, i.e. one can turn 11-inch diameter. It's actually technically an L5A lathe under the Harrison model numbers. The L5 was a 9-inch centre height and had a screw-on chuck. This was the next improvement, and in fact this Harrison 11-inch is otherwise identical to the Harrison 140, which is a metric lathe. That would have a metric screw cutting ability. This is more or less the same thing. So being the L5A model, much like the 140, they share the same accessories. It's got the American taper L00 spindle, which means that unlike the predecessor, where one had a screw-on chuck that really could only operate forwards, this can operate forwards or reverse, which may not sound a huge advantage, but it is when you come into the more advanced machining and you actually want to run backwards for left-handed threads, or you want to specifically use, let's say, a parting off tool, and that would work much better upside down. It's better to run backwards and have the tool upside down so the swarf drops away. So it's actually surprisingly useful having a lathe that runs forwards and backwards. So let's just go on that one. Actually, on motive power, this is a 3-phase lathe, therefore you will either need genuine 3-phase or you'll need a converter, or you could take the motor off and put a single-phase motor on. One massive advantage of this lathe is it's got a clutch. In fact, holding it here, it's this lever here, which you'll see shortly operates the spindle via a clutch. So you can actually leave the motor going when you're in normal operation and do your measuring or change speeds or bring your carriage across and re-engage the screw cutting. Whatever you need to do, you can leave the main motor running. So obviously single-phase motors don't start and stop as well as a 3-phase would. If you've got genuine 3-phase, even better. You'll take advantage of the fact this very unusually has got the dual speed motor on it. So this will operate from the 8 all geared headstock gears, effectively giving you 16 speeds. The control down here gives you forwards, back, high and low. So with those combinations and your 8 speeds here, you've got 16 speeds, forwards and backwards. And it's actually, if I think about it, it goes up to 1500 RPM, which is quite remarkable. I believe these are Timken roller bearings in here. Harrison did make a lathe up to 2000 RPM, which is, for the age of the machine, is fantastic, because for certain jobs you want a high speed from a cutting finish perspective. If you put it down to low range on the motor and come on the top here, it's actually got 34 RPM as the slowest. I'll put a photo of this speed chart on the top. Actually, it's quite useful. Same with the screw cutting details. While we're just talking about the motor, because I will be asked, it is a 3 horsepower motor in high speed. Therefore, that will be 1.5 horsepower in low speed, and low speed is 1450 RPM. High speed is 2900 RPM. There's 2 windings basically that brings the extra winding in when you go to high speed, give you twice the speed. So a few more features of this fantastic lathe. Talking about that American taper spindle, that's got a very generous bore. I've not measured it. I think if it's anything like the 140, it's 38mm, there or thereabouts. The bed on this one is not a gap bed, it's solid all the way, as you see in the images. This was originally built as a hydraulic copy lathe. It's actually got a extra casting on the back, and the end of the main cross slide has got an extra attachment. I think you can put an extra tool post at the back if you so wished, but that was from the hydraulic copy attachment. Because of that, It's a very unusual lathe in having this complete cast bed, which is very strong. It's not marked, but I believe because it was the hydraulic version, it was induction hardened. Certainly the bed looks absolutely mint, and I'll put a photograph on, but it does look really good. There's no marks, there's no dents, it doesn't been abused at all. It's actually had very little use, this lathe, from everything that I can see, and you can see it presents very well. In fact, the fittings are even chrome plated in a lot of places, which makes me think it's probably a 50s lathe, but everything's chrome and looks lovely. I've not cleaned it up. This is just its general patina, but it's very nice. So let's get straight on to operating the machine. Start and stop button here, so press that. Machine starts, and what I need to do is bring the clutch in. This is in slow speed. Operation there. This is one of the speed changing levers. In fact, that is high speed. In that range, we go to high speed forwards. That lever to there. That's slow speed, 34 RPM, so a fantastic range. Bring it to something more sensible there. While we're just on those controls, by the way, this machine is fitted with a suds pump, another really useful feature. I understand, I've never had to do it myself, that you can actually get a 3-phase suds pump to work off single phase just with a capacitor across it. Just like a cooling fan on a motor, or indeed a 3-phase cooling fan, because there's not a lot of pressure on the motor on these induction motor pumps. A simple capacitor will convert. So again, if you're running single phase, shouldn't be a problem to get the suds working. It is this control here. We turn it on, it hums away. There are no suds in it. However, I have a big 25-litre drum full of the stuff, brand new, which the winning bidder can have free of charge if he or she wants it. That can go with the machine, that's no problem. I haven't got any use for it, so it might as well. Right, let me just show you the power feeding and sliding, because another great feature of the Harrison lathe is the fact that you've got power feed on both axes, if you like. This machine's also fitted with a compound slide, but let's press the go button. Right. Let's just jump onto screw cutting. It's this lever here to operate screw cutting. You've got a screw cutting indicator here, or a thread guide indicator, which you bring into play like this, and it starts turning. The camera can't necessarily see that. You can use that to control when you bring it to make sure you always start the thread in the right place. Now it's started, and that will be doing a screw cutting operation. For general turning work, you need to use the power feeding and sliding, get you an X sounding a bit louder than it is because it's up on a pallet, and the metal stuff behind it's all vibrating, which isn't ideal. But anyway, what's next? Right, you've got a 3-jaw chuck there. Included are the reverse jaws for that. If this doesn't show condition, nothing will. I don't even think they've been used. Let's get a bit of close up on there. They look in excellent fettle and appear all to be there. We've got the chuck key. Rather importantly, we've got this for changing the chuck. The C-spanner goes on there. Select a high gear, give it a whack with the mallet, and that collar ring undoes, allows you to pull the chuck off. We've got a faceplate, and you see the American L00 taper in action there. That's sat unused for a bit, does want a little bit of a clean up, but it is in perfect order otherwise. And we've also got a 4-jaw chuck. Now the only thing with a 4-jaw chuck, this is a generic chuck. It's heavy, I know that much. But you can use that as a faceplate, but you can see there's no fitting to attach it to anything. That basically mounts to the faceplate. So if you need to use the 4-jaw chuck, you need to mount it to the faceplate and do it that way. I don't have the original chuck for the machine, but that's still a very good example and looks in excellent order. In fact, again, looking at the actual jaws of that, it's had very little use in its lifetime. There's also lots of cutters I'm throwing in there to get you started. 4-way tool post for putting your tooling in. As I said earlier, we've got the compound slide. You can just see in fact there's little or no backlash in that. It's fantastic in terms of condition. Undo those 2 nuts there. One can angle that slide for cutting. Screw cutting is an example actually, because when you're cutting a screw thread, you don't want to keep on going deeper to build the thread up with this normal position. You want to keep on angling it with this, so you'd set that to maybe 45 or 55 degrees, being imperial, and effectively you're always cutting the thread on one face. You're not trying to cut 2 faces at once, so that's where that comes in handy. Or of course taper turning, another good example where that will be useful. The rest of the time set that to 90 degrees like that. Onto the tailstock, you'll notice quite a difference actually to the normal 140 lathe, that the 11-inch has quite a nice streamlined tailstock, certainly indicative of the early models, which is great design. Morse taper 3, and included is a Jacobs chuck and a dead centre there. It's in there, and I'll put a picture of this extended actually. You've got your graduations on the top, but unlike all the Mickey Mouse lathes, Myford NL7s, etc., you get a really decent depth on this. So if you're doing some work and want to do some cutting or drilling, let's say, you've got a really great depth. You can go straight in one cut rather than having to do it in smaller increments and keep on having to move. As you can see, everything slides beautifully. You've got a cam locking action there. Again, expensive feature because the cheaper lathes just have a screw thread there, but this locks with a cam. In fact, I think Harrison's were 40% more than their Colchester equivalents in their day, and they really were a creme de la creme piece of machinery, and certainly far superior to Boxer, Myford, Colchester, etc. Really well produced machine. This one, mounted to its original stand, of course, has great cupboard space there for putting all your goodies in, which is another nice thing. I didn't make that. I don't know who made the chuck. I'd probably just take it off, but I will leave it on for the purposes of the health and safety. This is the output for the suds pump. You can see we've got all this tubing here, and that all looks good. If you want to be positioning that in. The light, I forgot the light, but the original low voltage light here. Position that in order, which is all great as well, especially if you're putting it at the back end of your workshop. It's somewhere dark. It's nice to have the original lamp to go with it. That's just on this control box at the end. Right, I've probably forgotten to mention certain things, but they're not necessarily coming to mind now, so that might well be it. If I have missed something, please read the item description below. I should put all the details in and lots of photographs. I would just say on logistics, I would be grateful if the lucky winning bidder could collect the lathe within, let's say 14 days, that'd be good. I have a forklift, so loading is easy, as long as you come with a suitable vehicle, flatbed, a transit van, Luton van or trailer. That's no problem, I can load it in. It's on a pallet at the moment, so it can stay on a pallet, or I can depalletize it and load it on as you so require. The other important thing is cash on collection, please. PayPal fees are quite expensive, so ideal if you bring cash on the day and you can have a good look around and check you're happy. Right, I can't think of anything else, so if you have been, thank you very much for watching and keep those bids coming.